Namaste, Jai Hind, and welcome to this edition of The Right Stand. Ladies and gentlemen, we're breaking format to go straight across to a reporter who's decided that he's not going to work with an international network because they refuse to call the Hamas a terrorist outfit. Noah Abrahams joins us live, going straight across to him. Noah, namaste. My name is Anand. You've taken a very strong step. Tell us the reasons behind this.
Well, the BBC using the words freedom fighter and militants, I believe, are misleading and senseless. This is our national broadcaster, and there is one way and one way only to refer to Hamas, and that is that they are terrorists. Our Prime Minister has said this morning in the papers it is incompetent that the BBC change their stance. Their stance, in my view, is outdated and makes no sense. And I believe, and my morals tell me, that I can no longer work for or represent the BBC.
Do you find support for your step that you've taken, Noah?
There has been a lot of support because people understand, because people have their eyes open, and because people are using their common sense and are seeing what is happening to the Jewish community in England, in Israel, and across the world. People have supported me because people have listened. Now it's the BBC's turn to listen and to change their stance.
But Noah, if the UK Prime Minister Rishi Sunak calls the Hamas terrorists, the attack's a terrorist attack, the UK says that it stands in solidarity with Israel, what's the position taken by the British Broadcasting Corporation? Why is it variant to the British government's?
Well, the BBC will say that they are impartial, despite the Defence Secretary in this country saying that it is against the law to support Hamas, and that is not what the BBC are doing. They are not supporting Hamas, but by refusing to call them terrorists, it's really muddy and murky water, and it's upsetting a lot of Jewish people. And you can say that by not using the word terrorist, it is in itself violating impartiality, and this is not a visceral issue. This is very serious. It's as serious as it gets because words have impact.
What next, Noah? Did you raise this concern when you raised this concern with the BBC and you said you're stepping down? How did they react?
They haven't replied to me formally. I've had a lot of colleagues reach out to me off the record and show their support and lend their support and show their appreciation. But most people have stayed quite quiet among the BBC, and it's the general population that have come to my support and not the BBC. The BBC has failed to comment.
Are there other members from the Jewish community, British Jewish community, part of the BBC? Are they willing to stand up for you?
Yes, I've had a lot of private phone calls from Jewish members inside the BBC, and I won't mention names, but people in very senior positions at the BBC have called me to say that they stand with me and that they support my decision. People want change at the BBC, but those at the top, Tim Davie, who is the Director General, and co, refuse to change their stance. And I would urge them to, because the Jewish community wants them to, as does everyone else.
Well, but we have seen on the streets of the United Kingdom a lot of chants against Jews, the Jewish community, a lot of fundamentalist Islamist chants. Is your family okay with your decision? Are your family members safe? Is the Jewish community largely safe in the UK?
No Jew, I would say, is safe in the UK at the moment. Our high streets have been vandalised and attacked. Our people have been attacked. People who have been targeted for wearing jewellery with Jewish symbols. People who are going to Jewish schools. The Jewish scroll boxes that are called mezuzahs are being ripped off of doors. The UK government and Prime Minister Rishi Sunak has now approved an extra £3 million to be spent on Jewish security. So listen, anything that happens in Israel has a direct effect on the Jewish community in Britain, and that's whether we like it or not. As for me, I take the risks. I know that speaking out like this has its risks. Thankfully, my family are okay, but there are hundreds of families, thousands of families who are not.
Do they support your decision, Noah? Does your family support your decision, or are they asking you to reconsider it?
No, my family support my decision. They support my moral stance, and they are with me 100%, which has been massively helpful when doing something as lonely as this. I'm on my own. I'm, as far as I know, the only Jewish journalist to leave their role at the BBC, and so it's a lonely place, but to have my family's support has been amazing.
But you have taken the right stand. Let me ask you, and I'm curious, is there any newscaster in the UK who's actually calling the Hamas the terrorists they are?
Yes, there are. Yes, there are newscasters in the UK. I can name a few: Talk TV, Talk Sport, Talk Radio, and News UK, and all of the broadcasters that fall under that umbrella have taken the stance alongside many newspapers and other publications. The BBC are the most influential, the most well-known broadcaster and media corporation on the planet. Yet they refuse to change their stance.
Quite surprising, and a lot of the BBC's international funding comes as part of the MEA, or the Ministry of External Affairs of the British government, and the British government itself. Do you think they should take cognizance and then send some instructions? Do you think some steps should be now taken to try and get the BBC to change its stance, or do you see no interference happening there? My final question, Noah.
Well, I think it will be difficult for the government to instruct. They can advise 7 former culture secretaries, and that's 7, say that the BBC's refusal to call Hamas terrorists, which is what they are, risks blurring BBC impartiality. I will leave you with this quote, and the task of a leader is to get his people from where they are to where they have not been. Now that is what the Director General of the BBC, Tim Davie, must now do.
Noah Abrahams, you've taken a very bold step, and you have taken the right stand, standing in solidarity with the people of Israel and rightly calling a terrorist outfit a terrorist outfit. Thank you very, very much for speaking with us, Noah.
Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, that actually sets up for us here on the right stand the real issue that we want to address. Are terrorists being normalized, humanized by these kind of apologists, by those who believe that they should take a neutral stand or a balanced view and link the Hamas to the Palestine cause? Terrorists are terrorists. The issue of 2 states is different, and that demarcation actually very beautifully drawn, not just by Prime Minister Narendra Modi, but also the US President Joe Biden, French President Emmanuel Macron, UK President Rishi Sunak, and so many others who have decided not to humanize terrorists. But these apologists, are they actually humanizing terror? And is that going to cause a threat for us closer home? We dwell on all these issues tonight.
The mood remains tense, sometimes even volatile. Last evening was a bit scary for us. Our phones started buzzing, alerts were popping up continuously, sirens went off in several places.
ये बच्चों का यूनिट है, बच्चों से जुड़ी चीजें आपको यहाँ दिख रही होंगी, बिखरी पड़ी है, किसी को नहीं छोड़ा है, और यहाँ भी रॉकेट से हमला किया गया है.
We will exact a very heavy price for Hamas, who will pay for what they did, and this action will be remembered in Gaza for the next 50 years, and they will regret that they started this, and we are responsible for it.
Israel is at war. We didn't want this war. It was forced upon us in the most brutal and savage way. But though Israel didn't start this war, Israel will finish it.
टेररिज्म की परिभाषा को लेकर आम सहमति ना बन पाना, ये बहुत दुखद है. आज भी यूनाइटेड नेशंस में इंटरनेशनल कन्वेंशन ऑन कॉम्बैटिंग टेररिज्म कॉन्सेंसस का इंतजार कर रहा है। दुनिया के इसी रवैये का फायदा मानवता के दुश्मन उठा रहे हैं।
Joining us now, and it's a CNN News 18 exclusive yet again, after a British reporter quit the BBC because the BBC would not call the Hamas terrorists. And after Noah Abraham's a youngster, here comes a stalwart, a former general and also former Prime Minister of Israel, Mr. Ehud Barak, joins us from Tel Aviv at this point. Namaste. Thank you very much for taking the time out and joining us live here. Thank you very much. My first question to you, Mr. Barak, how do you read the current situation?
You know, it started with a major blow to Israel, unprecedented all along the history of 75 years. We suffered within the first 24 hours, some 1,300 people were slaughtered, most of them civilians, elderly people, babies, okay, crazy. In Qaeda-like, or ISIS, Daesh-like, brutality and barbarian processes. So it was a kind of a shock for most of the public. But we recovered very quickly. We mobilized now 350,000 reservist soldiers, so we have enough force both in the Gaza Strip and in the north, in the Golan, in the Lebanon border. We established yesterday night a emergency government or emergency cabinet to run the war by adding 2 opposition members who were chiefs of staff, were senior generals that commanded the army, and they add the gravitas and the professionalism and calmness and understanding of war to the cabinet. And we got a far-reaching American support. They deploy here an aircraft carrier and sent us equipment that we need for the war. So we feel somewhat better, and we are, you know, we are a defiant species. We are a nation that knows how to unite when there is a common threat on us.
Yes.
And we are now united and determined to put an end to this type of terrorism. It's more than terrorism. It's a kind of a crazy, barbarian practices, slaughtering kids, decapitated victims, opening the tummy of pregnant women. Crazy. And no nation can afford it sitting on its border. If you remember from Qaeda case, some countries send their soldiers over half of the globe in order to kill the Al-Qaeda and Daesh people in Iraq and earlier in Afghanistan. We are part of this war, a global war, but we are dealing with our piece or corner, and we are determined to make sure that Hamas is paralyzed from its military capabilities. At every place they are there, we are going to destroy it.
It's phenomenal how Israel comes together despite the internal drifts and political oppositions within. You unite when it comes to a common threat that threatens the nation. But Mr. Barak, who is backing the Hamas?
You know, they are backed by money that unfortunately even our government allowed to stream, that comes from, part of it comes from Qatar and part from some other donors. They are helped by Iran, probably in money, but more in equipment, in ideas, in training, whatever. And they grow themselves gradually. You know, they took over, the Gaza Strip was part of the Palestinian Authority.
Correct.
And they made a coup d'etat, very violent at the time as well, against Palestinians that case, not against Israelis, and took over from the Palestinian Authority. And since then, Palestinian Authority could never go back. So in my judgment, there is a difference. Palestinian Authority with all its weaknesses, and they are sort of perfect, They are part of agreement. There is certain cooperation in fighting terror between Israel and Palestinian Authority. And in my judgment, they are the better part of the Palestinians. There are those in Israel in the recent 5 years, including the present government, who thought that in order to block the possibility of a two-state solution, probably it's better to weaken the Palestinian Authority and let the Hamas alive somehow. That, I think it was a grave mistake. And it helps them somehow to develop their capabilities. But I think that nowadays everyone understands that you do not wait until the crocodile jump at you.
Correct.
If you can kill it when it's still small.
True.
Or young.
But there are those, Prime Minister Barak, who are apologists who try to humanize terror. They want to broad brush the activities of the Hamas under the entire Palestine struggle. And this is happening across the world. What would you like to say to these people?
I would tell them that life will show and prove to them that violence is not the way. And the Palestinian people tried violence many times. I remember when I was Prime Minister, they tried. And in fact, I spent significant part of my life fighting against Palestinian terror. And when I met later on with Arafat, and we used to tell Clinton and others that you have blood on your hands. He said, and you also had blood. But there is a difference. I was sent by a democratically elected government to always target it on those who executed or launched, operated and planned terrorist attack against citizens. And the difference is we never targeted. We sometimes, unfortunately, killed an innocent person, but we never aimed a target at innocent citizens. And you deliberately sent them in order to kill innocent citizens. That's what we call having blood on your hands.
Yeah, the difference is in the intent. They came to kill innocents. Here in this case, you are targeting terrorists and innocents are dying because they're coming in the line of fire, which is unfortunate. But Israel, is it now being dragged into a long-drawn war, given what you're getting your hands into?
I would be happy to be able to tell you that I have a clear vision how to make it fast and clear. That's not the case. We have certain constraints on our operations. One is the issue of the hostages. There are about 150 of them. And it's a subtle issue. I don't want to dive into it because even the Hamas can see this kind of broadcast. But it's a constraint. Another constraint is the possibility that it will spread into the north, into Hezbollah, probably some dormant cells of Hamas or Islamic Jihad in Judea and Samaria, in the West Bank, and probably even militias Shiite militias backed by Iran who are deployed now in Syria, in the Syrian part of the Golan Heights. We might find ourselves surrounded by all of this, and this is we are not interested in it. I would not recommend it to the Hezbollah as well, because they will pay a heavy price for it. But if we face it, we will fight it as well. And even with all these elements around us, I can tell you honestly, it will be tough. It will be long. It will cost us a lot of toil and sweat and tears and blood. But we are not under existential threat, and we will win this war. Another element that I can call a constraint is the fact that even if we take over the whole Gaza, and it might take, I don't know, 2 weeks or 2 months, we take over and clean it from any element that was related to Hamas, every munition, every lab, every launcher of rocket, and then every office where they were active. We still have a question, to whom we pass the torch. So ideally, it was a great idea if some Arab force would demand that we will leave,
Right.
but take over. The Egyptians, probably with the Emiratis, the Moroccans, or Bahrainis, some multinational force
Right.
that will take, let's say, for 6 months, responsibility to block the Hamas from coming back. And then gradually bring back the Palestinian Authority to govern. It's their own people.
Right.
It's idealistic, but I don't know if they are right for it, and we cannot impose it upon them. It should
Right.
emerge from them.
Right.
And there is the last kind of constraint is the fact that we are acting under certain, now the whole world is with us because of the pictures of what happened. But
Right.
this tend to decline. When people will see innocent victims in collateral damage, we try to hit only target and we try to warn in advance, but we cannot avoid it from causing certain damage to innocent people there. We are committed to the laws of international laws of war.
Correct.
We are committed to them. We are trying our best to do it, but it's a constraint because you cannot do whatever comes to your mind.
Yes.
So we have to navigate it. So I cannot tell you how exactly it will develop. It probably start here. It might be developed against our will, deteriorate into full-scale exchange with the Hezbollah, for example. We are ready. We understand it's going to be tough, but we suffered,
Yes.
never in our history.
Yes.
Such a group of people of this size,
Yes.
citizens were killed by enemy, by external enemy that came in one day. I think that India is probably 140 times bigger population than Israel, 140 times. So if we lost, let's say, 1,300 people,
Right.
so it might be 1,300. You multiply it, it's probably 169, 175 Indians being killed by some terror attack within 24 hours. That would drive you crazy. Would do whatever it takes to destroy.
Right.
And that's where we are. And we feel certain kind of, let's say, closeness to you. You always suffer terror. You'll see it from close, different. You never swayed. You were ready to fight. In this regard, we have a common value.
Right, but Prime Minister Prime Minister Narendra Modi, President Biden, among other leaders, have very clearly drawn the distinction between terror, Hamas, and also the entire two-state argument between Israel and Palestine. But do you see this entire West Asia dynamic changing after this conflict, after this war that Israel has unleashed against the Hamas?
Listen, you think these sirens?
Yes, is that your wife behind you, sir? Yeah.
There's
yeah,
silence in Tel Aviv because of a meeting. But we are secure here. This is the room in every modern Israeli apartment. It's a room made with very heavy concrete walls in order to be able to suffer even a direct heat. I turned it into library, but I'm sitting in this shelter. So.
And that's why ma'am is standing there, because that's the safest corner.
Yeah.
I understand that.
So she's more beautiful. She probably attract all the attention of the viewers.
No, but if are you in a position to answer this question?
Come back to your question.
Thank you.
First of all, we are thankful for the expression that came from India and for the position of Prime Minister Modi in this regard, as well as we are thankful to President Biden or President Macron and so on. Very. Oh, now you can hear the interception by the Iron Dome. Interceptor that they hit the missile before they land in Tel Aviv. And so, I want first to emphasize it's not practical to execute now a peace agreement. I think that this event of the last week even delayed into the beyond the foreseeable future the possibility of have this trilateral deal that emerged between the United States, Saudi Arabia, and Israel to normalize relations between us. for the short term, it works against any kind of agreements. But our long-term objective is still to live in peace.
Right.
You cannot negotiate with the Hamas as a kind of Al-Qaeda-like organization. But it doesn't mean that we cannot at a certain point in the future negotiate with Palestinians. It's not my vision, and it is under dispute in Israel. The government, Netanyahu, for example, thinks differently, so that somehow a one-state solution is better, in spite of paying lip service from time to time for two states. I'm confident that the only viable long-term solution is a two-state solution, because if it's one-state solution, it will become either non-Jewish or non-democratic. Because if the block of millions of Palestinians between the River Jordan and Mediterranean, there are about equal numbers of Jews and non-Jews, mainly Muslims, and the Muslim population going even faster than ours. So within even immediately, it's binational nation if they can vote. If they can vote, it's a binational
make a fair point.
Nation, and within short term, a binational with Muslim majority.
Right.
That's not the Zionist or the Israeli dream. And if they cannot vote as a permanent, they only cannot vote for 50, 60 years. But if we formally make it permanent, that's not a democracy, where millions of probably almost half of the human beings under your control cannot vote. That's not democracy. And that will cut underneath the legitimacy and cohesion of our society. So, but I admit that that's not something for tomorrow or for a month after the end of this clash, which might be quite long anyhow. So we bear it in mind. There is an old Romans saying that if you don't know which port you want to reach, no wind will take you there. So I know which port I want to reach, and I want to lose my way or my eye contact with this objective. But this debate or dispute within Israel had to be solved after we together put an end to the military capabilities of Hamas in Gaza.
Right. Thank you very much, Prime Minister Barak. I saw ma'am actually exit the room. That means that the threat is past and the missiles that were fired at Tel Aviv have been neutralized. I wish you and your loved ones safety, and India stands in solidarity with Israel in this fight against terror. Thank you, sir. So that was Prime Minister Ehud Barak. Are apologists humanizing terror? That's the debate that we would have and the discussion going forward. We'll have our guest joining us.
Hello, Moto.
Sanju Verma, national spokesperson of the BJP, George Korean political analyst, and Lalit Ambardar, Kashmiri activist, would be joining us. Karthik Chopra, watching this broadcast, has shared an interesting fact about Prime Minister Ehud Barak, saying that back in 1973, Ehud Barak, famously wearing a female wig and high heels, led a commando raid in Beirut in which 3 top PLO figures were killed in revenge for the terrorist massacre of Israeli athletes in the 1972 Olympics. So this is the Israeli spirit, and they've been fighting this for a long time. But Lalit Ambardar and George Korean, thank you for your patience. Prime Minister Ehud Barak's time was unscheduled, and in between the missiles being fired, he just found 10 minutes to speak with us. But Lalit Ambardar, he says there is a continuum. He also says that these fundamentalists, these terrorists have they have a backing. And he also said both India and Israel have battled terror. Do you see apologists who are trying to give cover fire, trying to humanize terror, doing perhaps the biggest disservice?
Anand, you're very right. Let me recall when Sinn Féin, the political wing of IRA, was proscribed as a terror group. The BBC never broadcast the voice of Gary Adams, the head of Sinn Féin. His voice was aired through an actor. It was animated. That was the hypocrisy. The only thing BBC has done vis-a-vis the Kashmir Jihad, that Tim Sebastian in his hard task made Yasir, this Pakistani stooge, the terrorist Yasim Malik, confess on his show that he had killed unarmed Indian Air Force officers. That's the only contribution towards the Kashmir Jihad by BBC. Otherwise, they are always invariably calling those people who deserve to be tried for crimes against humanity as militant. This is what they have been doing. That I agree with you. But at the same time, what we have come to is not only about BBC. What our Prime Minister talked about, there is not a definition about, unanimous definition about terrorism. We are the worst victim. Listen, India has been the worst victim of pan-Islamism inspired supremacy and incompatibility. Right. Ever since 1000 years ago, the Kashmir, this Ghazwa Hind war was launched with the capture of Sindh by Muhammad bin Qasim. Ever since, in the contemporary sense, Malabar, Mapla massacre of Hindus, what did we do? Nobody talked about it. It was in consolidation. It was in support of restoration, Khilafat. Extraterritorial loyalties and affiliations for pan-Islamic sentiments, of course, encouraged by Mohandas Karamchand Gandhi. Then you had direct action in Noakhali. For days, Hindu corpses were lying and eaten by the animals. Then came bloody 1947 partition. Millions were Hindus and Sikhs were massacred. Then came first jihadi attack by Pakistan was 1947 itself. In October, they launched an attack on Kashmir. And ever since, can you imagine in Pakistan occupied Jammu and Kashmir, not a single Hindu or Sikh survived. All of them are annihilated. Then in Kashmir, we have been suffering with the Kashmir Jihad for the past 30 years. And whenever India takes an initiative, to ask the UN body to proscribe a terrorist, they are people like China who come in the way. You know, in the parliament attack, the mother of democracy, the temple of democracy was attacked. I
agree, and we don't seem to learn our lesson. See, this time around, Sanju Verma is there with us, and George Kurian is there. Sanju Verma, one of the things that Prime Minister Narendra Modi, as I say, namaste to you, Prime Minister Narendra Modi very clearly demarcating and saying, nowhere in the world can terror have any sympathizers. Can there be any justification for terror? We just spoke with the former Israeli Prime Minister Ehud Barak, and he said that pregnant women's wombs have been cut open. That's the level to which the slaughtering has happened there. This is barbarism. And we have witnessed it time and again in India. That's why he said India and Israel both have been victims of this terror. But then we had a Noah Abraham, a reporter at BBC, who's actually quit because the BBC refuses to call the Hamas terrorists. And we have such apologists closer home too.
Yes. Anand, namaste to you and to your viewers. I think that interview that you conducted with Ehud Barak was very informative. He called a spade, which is what was expected from the ex-Prime Minister of Israel. Coming to your question, I think Prime Minister Modi raised a very pertinent point when he said that, multilateral institutions like the United Nations have to come clean on defining what terrorism is. In the past also, Prime Minister Modi from international fora has said that, there is nothing called good terrorism and bad terrorism, So let us not have these, gray areas when it comes to terrorism, because there are some things which are either black or white. There is no room for any form of obfuscation. Having said that, I also want to draw your attention to the fact that, I think people who vandalize, indulge in barbarity, rip open wombs, decapitate babies, that is as ghastly and as horrific as it can get. But what is even more concerning and more devious is when so-called intelligentsia, so-called academia from Ivy League institutions and political parties who otherwise say that, hum nafrat ke bazaar mein mohabbat ki dukaan kholne aaye hain. And Anand, you know me, I'm not somebody who's going to hold back my punches. Look at the tweets put up by Jairam Ramesh. Look at what Shashi Tharoor has said. Or for that matter, look at the wording of the Congress Working Committee's resolution on the Israel-Palestine war. I will not even call it the Israel-Palestine conflict. We believe in a life of dignity for Palestinians, okay? We believe in peace, harmony and tranquility, okay? We believe that both sides should come to a dialogue, okay? But having said all this, have you seen any mention mention of Hamas being called a terror outfit by the Congress Working Committee? No. Rahul Gandhi, who has an opinion on everything under the sun, एक भी ट्वीट डाली है कि हमास एक टेरर, एक आतंकी संगठन है and it needs to be dismantled? No. Even Shashi Tharoor, the so-called liberal progressive from the Congress stable, he gave out a long post saying blah, 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 blah. But at the end he said, had Israel not done this, the reaction from the other side would not have been that. Let's be very clear. यदि अनप्रोवोक्ड कोई आपके घर के अंदर घुस के आपकी माँ बेटियों की इज्जत को तार तार करता है, आपको लहूलुहान कर देता है, and you react, then that reaction is called self-defense. But the person who enters unannounced, unprovoked, and engages in horrific bloodshed, which is beyond comprehension, उसको आप क्या बोलेंगे? उसका स्वागत तो नहीं किया जाएगा. And what I am worried about, Anand, just give me 20 seconds. What I am worried about is people saying that Israel illegally occupied Palestinian land. तो इनको मैं खाली 30 सेकंड में बोल दूं that Israel came into existence in 1948. From 1948 to 1967, Israeli occupation was not there. The Gaza Strip was occupied by the Egyptians. Israel had Gaza with it from 1967 to 2005, 2006 से लेकर अभी तक, in the last 17 years, it is Hamas which has been ruling Gaza.
Correct, and they have not conducted elections. George,
exactly.
So there is a lot of things to be said, but why not create this delineation between an act of terror and the politics of the demand for two states, George Kurian? And why broad brush such barbarity under a Palestinian struggle? Why?
And a very good evening to you, to my co-panelists here, Sanju Verma and Dalit Bhai, and to your audience. Firstly, as you know that I defend the Congress ideology, so I would like to just come on to what Sanju Verma just mentioned about the there is no tweet from Rahul Gandhi, condoling this attack from Hamas on Israel, and also the tweet she mentioned about Jairam Ramesh and Shashi Tharoor. So I would like to clarify here that Rahul Gandhi need not give a clarification as to Hamas is a terrorist organization, because everybody knows it that Hamas is a terrorist organization, and the act that Hamas has done on Israel is uncalled for. But having said that, Israel has responded, and the victim here is the civilians on both sides, be it the Palestinians and the Israeli civilians. So that is one thing. So that is I would like to clarify that this should be stopped. The war, the UN protocols are they are not abiding by the UN protocol as far as the war is concerned, because all the attacks from Israel is on the civilian side of the Palestinian front. So I strongly believe that the civilians shouldn't be attacked in this for somebody's political.
So, but George Kurian, where did the Hamas attack? The Hamas actually attacked the desert or the waters, is it? Or did they attack the civilians? Whose wombs did they crack open? Which children were part of the Israeli defense forces, is it? How are you so conveniently saying? No, somebody targets civilians, targets the entire agrarian community of kibbutz there, and you're broad brushing that. But the Israeli defense forces, who's sending out warnings to the civilians in Gaza saying vacate this place because we are coming after the Hamas? Did the Hamas say vacate this place, we are coming after the Israeli defense forces? Can you please hear yourself, sir? Has anybody said Hamas's act is an act of terror and Hamas is a terrorist organization? If that is understood, then why write paeans on what is already understood, that Israel and Palestine are in an agreement for the formation of two states, and there is an agreement that's a political aspect? Why write paeans on that? The position that should be taken is whether what Hamas has done is an act of terror and whether Hamas is a terrorist entity or not. That's the position you're supposed to take, and you have not taken that position.
Anand, let me clarify again for your audience. Hamas is a terrorist organization, and the act of terror that they have done, there is no two ways about it. But having
said that is the only way that needs to have been spoken, sir.
Exactly.
That is the only thing that needed to have been said. There was no need to bring in Palestine and Israel. That was not required at all. The fight is against the terrorist outfit and Hamas. And if it is using a university, if it is using a hospital to keep its rockets and a school to keep its rockets, who's at fault? If it is using babies and women as shields, is the IDF, the Israeli Defense Force, at fault, or are the Hamas cowards?
Nobody on earth would want to, endorse any terrorist organization.
My apologies to my panel, to our panelists here, because Prime Minister Barak's interview was unscheduled. He came in and that was a little bit of an extension. So we stretched on time here. My apologies, I'm really over on time today. I have to wind up, but we'll take this conversation forward. Thank you very much to all our panelists. Short break. And this is a conversation which perhaps would bring a smile on a day when there is a lot of despair, ladies and gentlemen, and this is closer home. A creative artist who I'm a big fan of and who's worked with us in the past and who's helped us smile through the times of COVID-19. We had the opportunity of hosting him at our studios at CNN News 18. It's a short conversation. Hope you enjoyed. When we come back, stay with us.